And in our creation story, Creator found himself in the universe that was all black. And of course, he got lonesome. When he got lonesome, we describe that lonesomeness because we can't touch it, and it's abstract, but you feel it. We describe it as ghosts. So ghosts can come in anger, in love, in frustration, sickness, so on. And ghosts do have a protocol. We use those protocols in our oral practice to treat mental health, what the Westerners call mental health.
Around 5 years ago, we started a collaboration with Dr. Reg and Rose Crowshoe, who are Blackfoot elders and traditional knowledge holders here in the Treaty 7 area. What they were finding was that there was a drain on the elder capacity here in the area, mainly due to traumatic events like residential schools, intergenerational trauma, and colonization. They thought they better get together with all of the elders in the making, and others so they could increase his capacity. The goal was to help heal themselves, help heal their communities, and also work with allied organizations within the area.
The elders, leaders, our ancestors believed those treaties was an acceptance of people getting together and living off the resources and natural laws and energy to survive together. However, the newcomers that came to sign the treaty decided to administer the treaty through written documents. All of a sudden we have written documents that become policy, like the Indian Act, that have more jurisdiction. So that was imposed on the oral system. And today our young people, through colonization, are suffering that colonization that happened to them because of written system imposing. And the camp is so important because we need to bring back those oral systems. We need to bring back those beliefs and practices that we used to deal with things like mental health, to practice the processes to help people that are suffering from mental health. Anya.
Oh, healing is a big thing with the elders. I see it happening the more that my grandparents engage with the elders in the camp. When they come to this camp and the activities that they do together, the practices that they have together, I can see for myself the healing within my grandparents. Growing up, I knew my grandfather and my grandmother. They went to residential school. My grandma went to day school. I knew that they endured trauma. I didn't know the extent of it, but after being involved in the work that they do and seeing them work through that together, because I also suffered through that intergenerational trauma, I had no clue that I was experiencing those things within my life until I became a mother. So being able to heal in a way with my grandparents and working with them and being here and helping the elders, it helps me become a better mother as well. And personally, I feel like that's probably one of their dreams, right? Is for their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren not to have to endure the things that they have before.
You know, growing up, I didn't want to be an Indian, and that's what they called us, you know, as Indian. So I used the term, you know. I didn't want to be an Indian. I really didn't. I hated being Indian. All the stereotypes that came with being an Indian, it really hurt me, and I wished that I could be non-white, just to be honest, you know, because I seen the privilege that they had and how their lives were, quote, so much different than mine was, you know, and many Indigenous people. I always think about, you know, that song, I'm Dreaming of a White Christmas, and for me, it wasn't snow. It was Christmas like white people had, like we seen on TV, you know, where I remember writing so many letters to Santa and never getting what I wanted, you know. It's just, we got what they could afford, of course, you know, because it was hard for our people to even get work. But it's through ceremony and stuff like this that people find the beauty in themselves, find the beauty in our culture, the strength in our culture, you know, who we were before colonization and who we are now coming out of colonization and regaining our strength, regaining our ceremonies, regaining our pride, so that the next generation doesn't have to walk around and not want to be Indigenous. They can stand strong and proud and be like, I'm Indigenous, I have so much beauty to share with you, let me shine. Yeah.
So my first start with the culture was going into a camp very similar to this, and you'd see teepees all over the place, probably 20, 30 teepees, and then there'd be ladies, you know, smoking meat, and then there'd be some of the guys that would go out hunting and then preparing the sweat lodge. So I got to learn, you know, a lot as a young man about what it takes to prepare, what it means to come into ceremony, how to approach an elder, you know, and then I got to go into my first sweat lodge, and for me that was a game changer. Like, it just kind of set me on a path where I felt, you know, connection, because I didn't know a lot about my culture. I didn't know a lot about my parents or, you know, where they came from. There were so many things that I understood after the camp that helped me to kind of navigate through some of those things, especially with my grandmother and some of the stories and things she went through.
This camp helps with trauma. It bridges the gap between younger generations with the elders, and it also revitalizes with the language, the traditions, the culture.
So often we were told not to cry, not to have any feelings, because it was not natural. Our parents who were in the residential school, if they see you crying, they say, what are you crying for? Wipe those tears away. And we would do that, and you're shutting everything in, and you become sick.
Because when a human is traumatized, then you become disconnected with your spirit. Then you just become. You're not whole. That's what we look at from an Indigenous perspective when we look at trauma.
People have been in a very segmented way in different parts, have been trying to tell the story of who they are. But like everything else, things like residential school, things like being alienated from where you were born, the opportunity was not there to really come forward and say, I don't care who hears what I have to say. I just have to let them know who I am, let them know where I come from, let them know the things that are important to me, the teachings of everything around us. Because for a long time, those things weren't given the opportunity to be brought to the forefront. We're not in a position to blame anybody for it. We also have responsibility to also tell the story to our families. But that also is a lot of work needs to be done.
And we need healing. As Native people and as elders, we carry a lot of weight on our shoulders.
Abuse. And, you know, people are numbing themselves using drugs and alcohol.
We've lost enough through colonization, residential school. We can't lose anymore.
People in prominent positions such as Phil Fontaine, who sort of said, I am in politics, but I'm also a survivor. And nobody knew that. So when they interviewed him and said, could you tell us your story? Then when he told his story, then they said there must be many, many more stories, not just from the people that live on reserves, but even people that are in prominent positions, very well educated.
Being able to be in the position to help interpret the Western and the Indigenous ideologies, help them come together, but also seeing what can our Indigenous beings and ways of knowing enhance the Western world. So these elders and their knowledge, I come and I take it and I interpret it into a Western sense that respects what they need within their group. So we always talk about paralleling and how we can parallel these ideologies, and I think it's more so how can our ideology increase and enhance Western viewpoints.
When we look at the two systems today, the written default system is supported by all the resources in Canada. And government, that's the law of Canada. You have to be responsible to and transparent to government. So when they're giving resources out for mental health, for healing, for anything, we have to follow the written system. Therefore, you have to use Western educated professionals, say, to treat mental health. And we don't understand Western terminology of mental health. And our elders are suffering the need to help our young people. So they're suffering a concept of system poverty.
All the knowledge we gather from each other, it's better than in a classroom or university or anything you can learn it from or a book.
Our Indigenous way of life is so organic. We're all equal. We have all the things around us. This world is so fast-paced, everyone feels like they need all of these things.
We don't have resources to have our circles, to have our call to order as the smudge, to have our elders that are our knowledge and policy parts of our meeting. Those are not protected in the written system. So we don't have the resources to bring them together anymore. And we need Western resources to be creative, to understand that the oral system shouldn't verse the written system, so that we can really take on the challenges of reconciliation, bring in Indigenous values and principles through our oral practice as equal to Western written practices, to understand each other and take on challenges like mental health.
We have some tremendously knowledgeable leaders, educated through, how would I say that, universities, also educated in the way of the land of our native people. When you put those two together in a parallel form, we're going to have some great things come out of it in the future, not only for Native people, but also all peoples.
I think in terms of helping with trauma, our elders spoke about it the other day, and they spoke about it from both the Indigenous and the Westernized practices and that worldview and frame of thought. And it's different being an Indigenous person, having gone through the understanding and the reclaiming of our culture, but knowing more about that intergenerational trauma and how it impacts all of us, right? And how we just speak to one another, how we engage, and where all of those historical hurts and pains come from. But then there's such a gaining of understanding, especially just listening to our elders. And I think that it's been a form of embrace, especially for them to have each other, but also this next generation, such as myself, learning from them and being able to hear where they're coming from and seeing them come through all of the harsh stages in their own lives, that, you know, seeing them flourish in their senior years to be such beautiful knowledge holders and come through the hardships, but being able to raise family and adopt others and just regain that sense of, again, spiritualism and community, but just that the trauma isn't gonna hold them down, and it's not gonna hold all of us down for the rest of our lives if we don't allow it.
I'm a soldier. I'm a battle soldier. I'm a residential school survivor. I was a federal police officer for 15 years. So I suffered 3 stages of post-trauma. But they don't know it until I have the opportunity to come out. And the thing that does that to you is going back to your spiritual ways. A lot of people start saying, well, I better go find out what sun dances are about, what pipe ceremonies are about. Just being with a traditional person.
I know what it's like growing up with somebody who's went through residential school and the trauma that he went through and the trauma that he's passed on to me. I also see the beauty of what we're creating here and how it is helping people deal with that trauma, release that trauma, and move forward in a good way.
When we started this camp, they did a ceremony, which they call a purification ceremony, which means you're taking all those things and you're putting them into the ground. So you're not thinking about those things as you're learning. And as you go along learning from the elders, then maybe you can go on to something a little bit deeper as far as ceremony.
So we need to let that go. We need to deal with that, with those suppressed feelings. So it took me years to go through all that and deal with it. Now I work in a community with doing all the things that I had learned how to deal with it. And one of the things that I tell the young people is, let it go. Let those tears run, because it's cleansing your heart. It's cleansing everything.
A lot of release happens here because when you're an elder, you're looked upon it for strength all the time, for guidance, and you want to show that strength to people. And it's nice to come out and just release, just let the tears flow. They're so healing, you know, just cry with people. They hold each other. We have our smudge, of course, which is such an integral part of our ceremony that we know we're safe and that smudge will look after us.
You heal by sharing with others. When you share the past and acknowledge that we all went through the same as elders, it is very important to heal. It's important to heal for our children and for our children's children. Very important.
We have elders from all over Canada, and they come here together to share their culture and their traditions. And I don't know, I've never heard of anywhere of a place where people bring together our elders to let them be themselves without needing to take something from them. So we're all about ethical space and safe space, and I truly believe being here in the environment we're in with the people is really a safe space.
You know, it doesn't matter who you are, what age you are, we are all dealing with our own kind of traumas. So I think, you know, through ceremony, we're just able to come together, you know, put those prayers and those good intentions out into the world and sit together and listen is really what it's about. We're here to listen, we're here to give back, and we just try to do our best to acknowledge that everyone is going through something, and we don't come from a place of judgment, so we try to come from a neutral ground and just honor that people have their own stories and that they need to be shared.
So this camp is healing. You can see it happen. They call it like a spirit within here, and I can't talk about what goes on in the circles, but when you see them sharing with each other, you can really see and feel that spirit that my grandfather was talking about, that they come back to who they once were.
We all sit in a circle and we share. Everyone has a chance to speak, like in a sacred circle. And this way we heal each other.
So when I relay my story, it gives them a little bit more courage to tell their story, to say, that's part of my story. So when we tell our stories, we're all kind of hanging on to each other and saying, it's okay, it's okay. We tell the story together.
It's nice to be around people who know what you went through, what your feelings are. It feels, when others speak about their trauma and they're able to be vulnerable about that trauma, you feel safe to be vulnerable and be, I hurt too. They're saying exactly how I feel. It's nice to have that safe place where I can talk about this trauma, because as much as the elders are healing and have healed so much, that healing never ends. It always continues. They're being asked to tell their stories and so forth, right? And which is beautiful in a way, because people need to know what they went through so they can have that understanding of what they've been through. But also, for the elders, it's hard because every time you tell that story, you're reliving it. You're reliving it over and over and over. So this is hard times for the elders, when they have to tell these stories, these truths about what happened.
But over here in the traditional camp, we run close to what the Creator gave us. Those are the laws and the actions of the Creator that we follow. So the uniqueness, those are the guides to our way of life. It's not a religion, it's a way of life.
Today an elder talked about in their lifetime they've seen 12 ceremonies that will never happen again, that are totally lost. And when you think about how many more ceremonies have been lost before this? This is the way we're going to keep our culture strong, keep our people strong.
So much throughout these last 4 days, we've been harvesting medicines, we've been talking about them. Originally, these are female teachings, right? And so when we sit in circle with our aunties and our nookums, there's so much more that's been shared just by having that time to sit down with one another and share how important these native plants are around us. So often that we walk around on the land and we don't often think about our footsteps and how lightly that we should be walking on them, so then not to disturb the medicines that are around us and they're calling out to us. And one of the things that I do work with is art, and I try to bring those medicines into my own practice. And so by teaching others that the medicines grow where we need them most. And in sharing that here as a community, we're able to really reclaim a lot of those teachings that aren't often talked about, because when we're so physically removed away from them, then we don't often see them in plain sight. But here we've been able to harvest and take them back, and make our tobacco offerings and call them by name and just have our own spirits regained within who we are, because it's all around us.
We are all relations. It's very important that, like today, it was so important to have ceremonies, just expressing all the feelings that we feel from dealing with grief.
As a spiritual person, you have to have love for everybody. You don't categorize your love for any just for my people. You show that love for anybody that comes to you.
When I grew up in a lot of racism, and so even the singing part, it builds you up so much with confidence and things, and then people are appreciating that.
And the sunrise ceremony is something special that we do in order for us to be thankful to the Creator and the universe for bringing us together.
And, you know, a lot of times we're passed down things like songs and things like that, things that we can bring back to our organizations and share some of those things with our co-workers and with our families, our children. And so I think that's the most unique part of what we do out here, is just taking all those things in, taking on some of those songs and teachings, and then sharing them with the best of our knowledge.
Because the truth is our elders are getting older, and we have lost elders. And that's one of the things we did today, is that we honored those elders that made their journey home. But life goes on, and there's going to be more elders who make their journey home, and there's going to have to be others to pick up that place, you know, and continue this work because it's so important. They talk about training the next generation of elders so that stuff like this can continue.
It's all, you know, if we can get all the elders in different provinces and all across Canada and the United States all getting together and forming circles like this, I think there will be a big change in the future. We might not see it now, but the next 2 generations.
Hey, thank you.